Good morning and good afternoon to our guests around the globe. My name is Bastian Giegerich. I'm the Director for Defensive Military Analysis at the IISS, and it is my pleasure to share this webinar entitled The UK Army's Digital Transformation, an integral part of the integrated review. And you will notice that there is no question mark behind this title. So we've got a clear agenda, namely to understand modern conflict, that modern conflict requires an army that can integrate with partners and enable its people, equipment, and resources to operate with maximum efficiency in order to compete with adversaries. It will need to be underpinned by a digital backbone so that data can be leveraged, and it will need to be operated by a digitally talented workforce. The challenge perhaps is to understand what the building blocks are on this journey and how you go about sequencing them and arranging the different elements of this agenda. And to address this and other questions, we have today with us two senior British Army officers who are leading the Army's digital transformation. They will talk to us about how the British Army plans to innovate and develop digital skills and what it can learn perhaps from other military and commercial digital transformations. Brigadier Stefan Crossfield is the British Army's Chief Data Officer and Program Director of the Army's Digital Transformation. Brigadier Mark Overton is an Army Reserve Officer currently serving as Head of Strategy for the Reserves. In his civilian career, Mark is the Chief Solutions Officer for Sierra Wireless, a company active in the Internet of Things area. Brigadier Stefan and Brigadier Mark will speak for about 15 to 20 minutes or so, and then it will be my pleasure to ask my colleague Franz Stefan Gadi, the IISS Research Fellow for Cyberspace and Future Conflict, to offer his comments and perspective on what we have heard. Following Franz's intervention, I will give Mark and Stefan the opportunity to perhaps give a quick response, and then we will turn to Q&A. And I hope that many of you will take this opportunity to get engaged and get involved and use the Q&A function that is available to you on the Zoom platform. The slide that is up now shows you how to do that. So keep your comments and questions, keep them coming, type them up. Don't wait until the formal set of remarks is finished. Do give us your thoughts and questions as they come up, and then we will try and pull in as many as we can. A recording of this event will be available on the IISS webpage, probably that will go up tomorrow. We will keep to time, so I will bring this to a close at around 12 noon in the UK. So with that introduction and those housekeeping remarks out of the way, it is my pleasure to hand over to the British Army, and Stefan will kick us off. Brigadier Stefan, over to you.
Bastian, many thanks. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to IISS for hosting this. It's the first in a series of engagements on FAIR and the British Army's digital transformation. And we're delighted that we've got, 123 people on here now. Welcome to all of them as well. I'm so glad you've been able to join us. As Bastian said, I'll give a bit of an overview of what FAIR is seeking to achieve and why. And then Mark's going to respond with a few points from the industry perspective, which is really helpful. Mark and I work collaboratively on everything we do in FAIR, so I'm delighted he's able to be here as well. I think we all will recognise that rapid change is imposing significant geopolitical, technological and societal pressures, and the Army's having to react to that. We think the future battlefield will clearly be more transparent, lethal and geographically dispersed than we'd ever seen before. And a technological revolution, part of the fourth industrial revolution, you could argue, is changing how that land battle will be fought. Thus, the Army's not just changing. We've done that many times before. This time, the Army is truly transforming. It's got to, in the way we approach the imperatives I've laid out. The time to act is genuinely now. We have a mandate through the integrated review that's given us the direction of travel, and THEA is a big part of that transformation. It's a priority programme commissioned to transform the Army's digital culture. I'll come back to that in a moment. And to deliver a transformed digital asymmetric Army that's capable of achieving and contributing to multi-domain integration. It's going to be achieved by substantial, coherent, and widespread action. And we're doing that both through orders and programmatic delivery. While change will be enduring and incremental, we're already underway. And actually, the British Army has made some significant headway in the defence context on its digital transformation. And we can cover that in a moment. So 3 big outcomes. If we can have the first slide up, please, that'd be great. Thank you. Are at the top in the circle. Those macro outcomes are to be able to outcompete our adversaries, the function of any army, clearly, but to be able to do that while integrating with our partners. And that is a major challenge. I'm very happy to take questions on that later. And obviously underpinning that, sat at the bottom of the circle intentionally, is the requirement to improve efficiency. The significant affordability pressures that we knew were coming and which have been exacerbated by the current COVID crisis are something that technological revolution is definitely connected to. To give you some idea of what value we're placing on this, we're in the middle of an audit at the moment. The British Army spends somewhere in the region of £500 million a year in 21-22 on digital and IT. And that's split roughly between 50-50 between run and change. So there's a significant amount of resource behind this. And I think we'll see that increasing over the coming years as the transformation takes hold. The Army's fully invested in this as well. It's run by the Deputy Chief of the General Staff, Lieutenant General Chris Tickell, as the DCGS. He's the Programme SRO and our digital champion. And the Army has handed over a quarter of all of its ExCos to the digital agenda. So every quarter we sit in a digital setting to discuss THEA and our transformation. Turning to the lower half of the slide now, the construct, just quickly to give people some idea of how we're going about this. Firstly, we're doing this as a whole Army approach. This is not being done to the Army, specifically not by the Chief Data Officer or the Chief Information Officer. It's being done by the Army themselves.
Shall I pick it up, Bastian?
Mark, do you want to jump in until Stefan comes back?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Stefan was just talking about how we're running the program. So we've really broken it down into 3 elements. Accelerators, which are really proof points for us across the functional directorates to get after early wins and to prove that digitization.
A total 6 at the moment.
Oh, you're back. No, he's lost. In terms of getting after real proof points in the to show the benefits of digitization. Enablers, which is really the underpinning architecture, the data governance of data we need, the digital backbone, absolutely fundamental, enable us to deliver this digital transformation. And then the catalysts, those areas such as cybersecurity, which are absolutely fundamental to the program. Stefan, are you back online?
I am back, yes, struggling with home working as we all are. Thanks, Mark, for jumping in. We'll carry on with catalysts then. Catalysts are nested into the wider director capability IRE portfolio. Aligned with the DSTL tech maturity framework, we're going to identify a number of key catalytic technologies that we want to go after. They're to be confirmed. They're going to the board in June for final confirmation, but quite clearly things like artificial intelligence, machine learning and autonomy will be in there. We're very excited about advanced analytics and bringing a world-class analytics engine on board at the moment into the Army hosting environment. Synthetics, big part of our training environment, and cybersecurity and quantum are definitely on the list. The catalysts is a new addition to THEA, probably the most recent, and it completes the 3 legs of the stool, if you will, on which the program is built. What I really wanted to dwell on, though, today, more than the construct and the programmatics of orchestrating a digital transformation, is our ethos and approach. And that's the text that sits in the bottom of the triangle. And this is where, in Q&A, and your help will be appreciated on how do you really deliver technological transformation at the moment. Digital transformation is a challenge that we're all going through. So we think it's about cultural change. People become very attracted by the tech, you know, we're all magpies deep inside maybe, and we want to go after the shiny things, but you know, that's not the point. And actually getting your data right, which is the hard yards at the start of the process, is a really culturally embedded change to the way we think, valuing that data as the new oil, if you will, within our system. We need to be aligned with Defence Digital. We are not a frontline command in our own right. You know, multi-domain integration, single information environment will require all of us to work across a number of domains, and therefore working to Defence Digital's rules of the road, as they're being called now, and particularly the digital rules that are in place now under Caroline Bellamy as the Chief Data Officer, will be absolutely fundamental. And we're going to do that in an open and transparent way and remain compliant throughout. And the Army is already a way ahead on that and probably leading in some of those areas. So we're quite excited by that. We've got to recognise that we're delivering this with humility. We don't know all the answers. I have a great network of commercial partners, and the open and transparent element is directly connected to the fact that we want to do this with humility and with support from partners and stakeholders going forward. Hence, engagements like this, where I'm really excited, not just by your questions, but by your advice. Come back to us about how you found this and how you succeeded. I touched earlier on the fact that this is federated. We are not doing this to ourselves. The Army is going to deliver digital transformation based on its needs through those functional leads and the commands. It's enabled by direct information. That's my job. I've got a key enabling role, but certainly it's delivered by the functional leads and commands. And then lastly, we just recognize it's emergent and agile. If it's truly transformative, it's really uncharted. We don't quite know where we're going to go here. You know, and getting an Army to embrace the idea of a minimum viable product and then iterating from there is a real challenge. You know, we go back to the cultural point at the start, but we're doing it. We've already started. COVID has been a great catalyst in some of the work we've done for our people in terms of empowering them to do their work remotely. And we will continue to look for those opportunities and address the challenges ahead through an uncharted, agile approach. I think we're going to hold questions for the end, so I'm delighted to take those when we come to them. I'm going to hand over to Brigadier Mark Overton now. As we said earlier, he is alongside me on this because he brings tremendous external experience from the industry itself back into the Army, and he's able to be our babelfish, if you will, and talk to us in our own language with our own acronyms and help us on our journey. So Mark, thanks for joining us today, and over to you.
Thanks, Steph. I know I've been called a babelfish before. So I sit here both as a reservist and also as a non-technical, I'm an infantry officer, so non-technical officer as well. So yeah, this really is culture change. Can I have my slide up, please? So while that's happening, just to really, bring to life that this is like any other large, complex organization, and it has operating models, it has process, people, and legacy platforms to deal with. And so my observations from what I see dealing with large, global, complex industrial organizations on a day-to-day basis with Sierra Wireless are very similar to what I see in the Army. What I'm really pleased to see is that there are pockets of absolute excellence in terms of innovation. And we are seeing increasingly the sort of digital awareness and culture permeating through the organization, driven, if we go to the sort of top left there, by a very strong alignment into the integrated review, the defense alignment with Defense Digital, and the Army board focus. I am seeing significant executive engagement every quarter, as Stefan said. We have an Exco Digital that's really taking up a lot of the Army board's time and holding people to account to deliver the digital transformation. And it is a priority up there with the integrated review and the Army operating model. This is the third priority for the Army headquarters. So getting that senior level engagement and buy-in, absolutely fundamental, and it's right across the senior leadership team. What I also see, while we're seeing pockets of excellence, is that coherence. And that is something that the industry can help us with, because they're spread across different teams, different parts of defense, and they have that industry perspective. But right at the heart of it, it is in the space of the enablers, the data, the operating model, the board cadence, the design authority, that we're establishing in the strategic center in Army headquarters. You know, really getting that end-to-end view of the system and how the various elements, the programs hang off it, so that we can map and model the interdependencies. We can have a better understanding of an integrated roadmap to deliver that multi-domain integration. And we can also understand where the risks are. And I think that is absolutely fundamental, to have that all-seeing eye across all of this. And again, connected very strongly into defense. Proving the concept is something that we need to do relentlessly, shouting about those early successes, not just the major programs that we see planned out to 4 or 5 years out. It's about bringing it to life today, really changing the way people are working, the lived experience for our soldiers, absolutely fundamental. Changing that culture is critical. We talk a lot about culture. Breaking down silos. We are a silo-driven organization. Command and control is a strong part of our ethos. So to get people to work transversely, to get them to look across their shoulder, collaborate, especially when we move people around so often, is really important that we raise awareness of what's going on in different parts of the organization. And again, industry can help that. The number of instances where an industry comes in and talks to 7 or 8 different parts of the defense. And you know, I think as a true trusted partner, that industry needs to give a view to defense where they can really maximize efficiencies and scale and pull together those disparate approaches to really give a much more coherent approach. Designing that end-to-end system, taking a systemic approach is critical. We can't just do point solutions. We have platforms that need to be connected. We have data that needs to be disseminated. We have digital talent that is growing throughout the organization, but leveraging those in uniform, such as myself, the reservists who work in this space. We have some great teams, the specialist group information services, the engineer staff and logistics corps. These are experts that we can pull in and have access, who understand the organization and have that credibility, but it's also the civil servants. And again, it's industry. You can really provide that trusted partner status so that we make the right decision. And partnering, it is an ecosystem play. What I learned from my day-to-day work is you do it yourself. You know, it absolutely needs a partner-led approach. And we need to work in depth to a level we've never done before with a partner ecosystem. And finally, as I said before, this is not just about the Royal Signals and the technical side of the military. It's not just the CIO, the CDO. It is everyone's business. This is as important as the combat element of our organization. It is a massive enabler. It's key to our differentiation, to our competitiveness, and to our efficiency. And we need to get that into the DNA of all our soldiers, and we're working on that as we speak. That's it from me.
Mark and Stefan, thank you very much for outlining that transformation agenda and the important elements in it, and the approach that the Army is taking to this. I think there's a lot to discuss. I see questions already coming in. Please keep them coming. We will try and group them a little bit and get to as many as we can. Before we do that, though, I'd like to ask Franz to take the screen and offer us his remarks. Franz, you'll probably also want to make a couple of comments in relation to how other armies go about this. So zoom out a bit, as well as comment on the specifics of what you've heard. Franz, over to you.
Thank you very much, Bastian, and thank you, Mark and Stefan, for 2 excellent presentations and a great overview of what the British Army is doing in the field of digitalization. I really think that the British Army is really taking the lead here in Europe in many, many ways, and I really suspect that ground forces on the continent will look to the British Army for best practice examples in the years to come in many aspects of what both of you just presented. And I've just jotted down a few notes while you were doing your presentation. I think synthetics, for example, and training environments, I think this is something that's going to be quite revolutionary in many, many ways in how we practice and prepare our forces for future operations. And I think this is something that with huge potential that is really underdeveloped in many parts the continent and in many European armies. I generally also think that this current emphasis in the British Army on digitalized information management or new ways to do information management, integrating multiple domains in order to gain an information advantage, and with the British Army ideally embedded in a whole of government or almost a whole of nation defense effort, comes really natural, I think, in comparison to many other European armies, to the British Armed Forces overall, if one goes back to British military history, right? So, of course, the most prominent example would be the Battle of Britain in 1940, where the key to victory lay in superior situational awareness by the creation of a common operating picture, as well as introducing a fairly resilient, comprehensive command, control, and communication system. And I know that the Air Force gets most of the credit here, but it really was a whole of nation effort to a certain degree. And I think, for example, one should note that the groundwork or the foundation for the successful defense of Britain during that time was laid in the 1920s and 1930s with the critical information infrastructure that was created. For example, Britain, unlike most other European countries at the time, had a national grid, right, that sort of provided the technical or an important technical backbone for fast information sharing, and which was also at the same time a pretty resilient grid or national system. And I think this really speaks to this idea of silos that were also mentioned. And I think moving beyond the army, when it comes to looking at this whole concept of competing with near peer and peer adversaries, this is something that we have to keep in mind, the technological policy perspective, but also these other important aspects here. And I guess all to say is that I think the emphasis on superior information management and creating a digital backbone in the form of an Internet of Military Things or a tactical domain cloud is really an important step and the right one at that for the Army. And I think, as I have repeatedly argued myself, if the Army is serious about moving forward with multi-domain integration in the coming decade, its technical foundation really will have to be a fairly resilient cloud architecture, which facilitates data sharing in even degraded tactical environments, right? And ideally is interoperable at the NATO level and with other battle management systems in the United States and on the continent, right? So I do think this idea of interoperability here is going to be a key component, of course. But generally speaking, perhaps I want to make a few broader points here when it comes to digitalization or the digitalization effort overall. And this is really just food for thought and perhaps meant to trigger a discussion for the rest of our little get together here. I think one of the key aspects that I would like to look at is this idea that we would do very well not to conflate tactical and strategic decision making because of digitalization. So I think the basic concept behind all of these digitalization efforts at the end of the day, behind this idea of multi-domain integration, is really this idea of superior situational awareness brought about by information superiority, which translates into faster decision-making and an increased operational pace, right? It's this whole idea of the OODA loop that we all know about: observe, orient, decide, act. It just reminds me of this Netflix a mini series called Cobra Kai, the Karate Kid, right? Where the mantra of the dojo in that series is strike first, strike hard, right? This is sort of the underlying tactical assumption here. And of course, faster decision making is really important at the tactical level. However, it strikes me also that it could actually lead to some problems at the strategic level, right? So if at the strategic level, moving fast and coming to a faster decision does not automatically translate into sets an advantage. And I think if you go back again into British military history, many strategic decisions that turned out badly can be traced back to really fast decision-making processes where there was little incentive to change the course of action after the decision was taken, despite a fairly good information management system in place. So I think it's important really to understand here, in particular when it comes to the so-called competition phase, or this idea of trying to outcompete an adversary or a near-peer competitor or peer competitor. We need to keep this distinction between tactical decision making within the British Army, and then also those strategic decision making separate to a certain degree. Second, this is just something that I thought that I had when I was cleaning up my library yesterday. I think we ought to be careful not to create what I call an introverted data culture or information sharing culture. But by that I mean getting inundated with our own data at the expense of genuinely trying to understand our adversaries, right? And I came across this book again, The Utility of Force by Rupert Smith yesterday, but I was cleaning up my library, and there's a sentence in there that I just would like to quote, which I found very pertinent to this discussion. He writes, "There's a danger of knowing more and more about oneself and proportionally less and less about the enemy when it comes to digitalization," essentially. He wrote this a couple of years ago, this book. And I think the idea is that if we manage to break down silos, if we truly introduce a multi-domain architecture and enable multi-domain integration and fusion, create an internet of military things, overhaul command and control, if we have a perfect understanding really of our own capabilities, the geographical disposition, and operational status of all of our own units, it still does not mean that we will have gained a decisive information advantage over our adversary, right? So I'm a bit concerned here that we often have strawman images of our near peer and peer competitors, and we just go down path dependencies and embark upon mirror imaging when we create our own preferred way of fighting and competing that perhaps may not correspond to reality. And of course, I know that these concepts in the British Army have been war gamed, and there's been a lot of experimentation going on and so forth. And I know this has been done very thoroughly, but I'm always, shall we say, a bit skeptical when most of these war games and results tend to be fairly similar across the board in NATO countries, whether it's in the United States, Britain, Italy, or France, when it comes to the outcomes of a lot of these war games about the future operating environment. And my very last point that I would like to make before kicking off the discussion is you both talked about changing culture, and I think this is really an interesting and very important component, and I perhaps want to expand on this in a slightly different direction. I think it's really important here to examine possible tensions between a new digital military culture and the Army's mission command philosophy. And I think that's particularly true to the British Army. In comparison to many other armies, I find that British Army culture remains a bit more hierarchical and top-down than is found in other militaries, with mission command historically also suffering from a somewhat tenuous standing. For example, I think what are really the logical, or what could be some of the downsides of over digitalization or connecting all of us within the service, right? I think it's really important here to see, for example, to what degree do we create tactical inflexibility at the lower echelons of command here because of digitalization. For example, will a battalion commander who's able to follow every footstep of his company command and has access to the same information in the battle space than the company commander, would he genuinely be able to not interfere in the company commander's tactical decision making, right? I know this has been also discussed before, but it's still something I think there's an inherent tension here that I would like to focus on, or that I will continue to focus on also in my research a bit. So, at the same time, we have to ask the question, right? If we are really successful with all this digitalization efforts, what do we do when connectivity is really lost? Or what do we do if we really need to reduce our digital signature to avoid detection in the modern battle space, right? Can we really ensure this march to the sound of guns mindset, right, in our military commanders, inspired by a mission command philosophy if we are over digitalized, right? And I think this is an important question. In reality, at least I think from my perspective, if we're really serious about implementing multi-domain operations, I think we need to re-examine some of our doctrinal tenets more thoroughly, right? This is just one idea that I'm throwing out there, but perhaps in reality, at the end of the day, in order for multi-domain operations and multi-domain integration to work, maybe we need to think about something more akin to the French methodological battle doctrine of the 1930s, rather than Prussian mission command or Auftragstaktik, lest we paralyze our more junior commanders under certain circumstances because of ongoing digitalization efforts. And let me perhaps stop it here. Thank you again for this great presentation, and back to you, Bastian.
Franz, thank you so much. These presentations have sparked a lot of interest. We already are at about 24 questions or so. So we need to, I will, if that's okay for the speakers, I will collapse our back and forth a little bit, and we'll pull straight from what's in the Q&A to connect to the themes that Franz has pointed out and that you have spoken to. One very easy one that we can perhaps just deal with at the beginning. Somebody has asked whether we can upload those slides to the webpage. Would that be, can they be released? Mark and
yeah,
Stefan?
that's fine. There's nothing in there, Bastian, that we're not happy to share.
So we, with your permission, then we will add them to the recording of the event as a download. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so that's one question down. Only 20 to go. So I want to group them a little bit, and it goes also, it connects to what Franz has said as well. And I want to start with that point of digital culture and how to transform that and how to change that. And there are a number of questions that relate to that. So Paul Jagger is asking, how will the Army enable the cultural change necessary to enable digital transformation? How does a chain of command and organization hierarchy support agile, self-directed teams working across functions, where skills, not rank, is what determines a team member's role? So that is a question. There are a few related ones. For example, Adrian Cowroy is asking, you talk about becoming more agile. Our experience in IT with introducing agility was a shift from a culture from physical outputs to measurable benefits. It's a hard shift with senior levels and with stakeholders. How do you engender that shift in attitudes and behavior in political and public circles so that you're not being held back in that transformation? Let's maybe start with that. And I think I'll ask Stefan to kick us off, but then I wonder whether Mark maybe also can add a few thoughts from that private sector perspective, because it's obviously, you need to come at it from more than one direction. So Stefan, Mark, and then I'll ask Franz whether he wants to add anything to that pack of questions.
Yeah, great. Thanks, thanks, Bastian. I mean, that's a great question, and I'm really grateful that it's there, because it plays to the point I made when I was delivering that it is cultural. It's not a physical thing, that we're talking about here. So first of all, what do we think about culture? Well, the board talk about it a lot. We have a standing agenda item to discuss where our transformation is being impacted by cultural restraints. So we're definitely looking at it from the top down. We're going to work a lot more, I think, in the next 12 to 18 months around embedding the skills deep in the organization, into the organization. So embedding that within the 2-star command areas and embedding it within the 3-star commands, because it's fundamental that this comes from the bottom up. I mean, it's interesting going back to Franz's point around empowerment and sort of mission command. There is a real friction, there's a real tension between overloading us with information in a mission command sense and allowing too many people too much power. And there's a couple of other questions in there that talk about this. We have a digital gateway. We're trying really hard to make sure that everybody chooses to come to the gateway so that they are empowered to come through it, and we support them with the knowledge, skills, and experience if they haven't got it, to allow them to go through their particular transformation journey. And a number of those are really low levels things that we don't need to bring in deep into the D-Info core area, into Army Digital Services or onto our analytics platform. They're done through things that sit on our desktops now, through the Power Platform, Power BI. So that mission command and that empowering people to come to the gateway is important. The next thing I think in terms of culture is just making it clear that we're going to stratify the levels of experience that people have got. So there'll be a common level of understanding, but we're also going to bring some people who currently lead in the Army in terms of transformational change further up the KS&E ladder. So we have a thing called the Army Advanced Development Programme. Lieutenant colonels who choose to come and work within the Army for their development, as opposed to going to the Staff College for the Advanced Command and Staff course, they will become part of those change champion network, which will help us with that cultural change. User-centric design is central to all of it. I think there's a question that touched around that. We are working hard at the moment to bring, I suppose it's the Army's pattern to bear. What is our user-centric design pattern? Working with a lot of big organizations to understand how they go about this and bring something online which describes our approach to user-centric design. And then lastly, benefits. What a fascinating area that is. So accelerators at the moment are principally predicated on cashable benefits, really easy to understand, bottom line stuff. How much money is it going to save? I'm working with a number of our big sort of industrial partners at the moment around non-cashable benefits. What does that look like? We need to have a lexicon that talks about what are the non-cashable benefits that we value as part of our transformation. And a number of those will be related to cultural change. This is certainly something that Defence Digital want to do as well. And only yesterday I was speaking with Caroline Bellamy on her board about the fact that she needs to, I think, help us across defence to understand what those benefits are, so that we can agree what's worth going after and what maybe we don't do at the moment. Hopefully that helps to answer it in some way. Mark, over to you.
Yeah, just really building on that point I made before. I think we're like other big organizations. You have a sort of CTO, a CIO function, and within the management teams, the role of the CIO is being redefined. It's now very much digitalization is very much COO, CEO business. It's exactly the same here in the Army headquarters. The Deputy Chief of the General Staff is the digital champion. He's the one that convenes the executive Army board meetings and is driving this agenda. So yes, he is supported by the Royal Signals, the D-Info and his team as the technical SMEs, but this is whole force business. And what is also, I think, helping is actually the different ways of working we're seeing with COVID as well. I can say this as a reservist. I've never felt more engaged with the organization that I have, being able to access it remotely, to manage my inputs and outputs, through the digital portals, in particular, little things like RAPs, the ability to manage your payroll digitally. These are transforming and helping enable a whole force approach. We feel very much part of the team. It feels like you can access the opportunities, you can contribute a hell of a lot easier. And I think that is also going to help change the way people engage in the Army, instead of being in a sort of command and control environment where that visible leadership, everyone being in the same space is previously been the case. So I think the impact of those smarter ways of working is also going to help change that culture.
Thank you very much. I think we'll move on to a next set of questions, given that we have a rich menu to pick from here, and I had grouped a couple that relate to that culture point into one, so I'll continue in that same vein. And there's one that also requires us to zoom out, or a set of questions that requires us to zoom out a bit from that aspect, and really focus on the purpose of technology and digital elements for these goals, Stefan, that you have outlined, which include, of course, outcompete adversaries. And there's a question from Tom McCain, who is saying, standing back from the detail, what is the vision for the Army in 5 years' time? And specifically, he's asking, will the benefits of this, of what you're describing and what you're doing, be able to compensate for reduced mass? If so, will this be most evident in the teeth or the tail? And there are a couple of related questions on that theme. Let me just see. There were a few earlier on that also talk about the role of modern technology to break down silos to achieve these things that you alluded to. Would you like to engage with that? Perhaps again, Stefan, I'll ask you to start, and then we'll see who wants to come in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a really fair question. I mean, there's two parts in there. You know, the vision for the Army in 5 years' time. It's enshrined in the integrated review. I mean, I don't want to rehearse the entire construct of that here, and it's not actually, you know, my core responsibility to deliver that. What I would say is, without wanting to name drop one of your fellow organisations, we will be at Roost this summer for the normal series of land warfare. We'll be taking the digital element of that to a subsequent RUSI event where we'll have exactly the conversation that's in this question. It's currently direct capability led work to understand really where we can use digital enablers to act as a force multiplier and deliver the delta which we have agreed to reduce in terms of headcount in preference for having digital capabilities. I think the fundamental question, though, is not so much about can you do it, more the reality is we've got to do it, because it's not physically possible to operate using mass to solve the problems of future warfare. So to me, it's not a, you know, will it work? It's more, you know, how far do you go down that road, and how much mass do you reduce in order that you're able to fight a cross-domain battle now in, you know, in cyber environments, information environments, as well as in the physical environment. In terms of whether it's teeth or tail, I'm agnostic of that, because I'm leading on behalf of the Army, working with the Army leadership to deliver digital transformation. And I said earlier, this is the bit that's quite hard for us to get our arms around, and there's a number of questions around it. This idea that it's, you know, it's uncharted and explorative in an agile sense means that we don't really know. I mean, there is huge opportunity in tail. Don't get me wrong. The support fully recognises where the results will manifest at this juncture. Mark.
Yeah, no, can I just build on that? You're cutting out a little bit. I think it is teeth and tail, it's everything. You know, this is a cross pan-Army change program. What I see from industry is, and it's the often discussion I have, is, you know, it's about being more competitive, about making more money, more profit, but it's also about being hyper efficient. And efficient is not about just saving money, it's about using your resources better. So I was with a very large industrial company the other day, CEO of which, he was third in the market. He said to me, my number one competitor, by connecting all their assets, by better monitoring their fleet, is selling 25% more services over their platforms, and they're 20% more efficient in terms of serving those platforms. That philosophy is a philosophy that we're looking to employ in this program, you know, to really get after that, you know, what is it, the competitive edge? Franz Stefan talked about that data, the OODA loop, you know, that is part of it, but actually knowing where your fleet is, understanding its health, its state, you know, just before it stops working. So you can do predictive maintenance. You don't have to send out somebody every month to go and check it. You send out somebody when it's needed. You know, that is just going to change the processes and the documentation and way in which the Army operates. That the fundamentals are going to change based on digital process re-engineering. And that's where you start to get more competitive and more efficient. And that's exactly the same across any other large organization.
Mark, thank you. Franz, would you like to add onto what you just heard?
Yeah, well, just to come back to the original question, right, about this trade-off between mass and technological capabilities and digitalization in 5 years down the road. I think the person posing the question, I think, raises an interesting point, right? If we look at digitalization 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, of course, we will get different answers to this very question. I think in the short term, there may be a trade-off between mass versus digitalization, that is, certain capabilities that we will need to sacrifice in the short term in order to enable or have the resources available to really do this transformation, Brett. I think in the long term, the ideal would be that this is not a trade-off between mass and digitalization, but really digitalization is enabling mass, right? And this is now, I'm really talking here about introducing human-machine teaming in the long run, also more so-called attritable platforms, right? And also semi-autonomous and autonomous platforms that are going to operate. Of course, the land domain poses significantly more challenges than, for example, the air or naval domains when it comes to this sort of digitalization. And so I think the British Army here is a bit more conservative, perhaps, than, for example, the Navy or the Air Force, which in my opinion is a very good thing. But I think in the long run, there shouldn't be a trade-off. I do think implicit in the integrated review is this bet that we take into account, that we actually accept a certain reduction in military capabilities in the short term in order to really have a more transformed military force or army in the medium to long term.
Hans, thank you very much. I want to have, if we manage in terms of time, I'd like to at least get to two more groups of questions. One is around partnerships and one is around skills. And partnerships, there are a couple of really interesting questions here, and people think of partnership in terms of working with other services. They think in terms of partnership working with allies, and they're thinking also, of course, about the private sector and the broader civilian community. So Rupert Hill, for example, is asking, our allies are grappling with the same issues. How closely are we collaborating with them? How connected are we in S&T terms? And then he also asked, in creating Internet of Things products, I learned to build with partners and fail fast. End users really started to think how their business could be improved once they had seen the data flowing. How can we get this experimentation approach, get to drive this experimentation approach at lower levels? Is one of the questions. Related to this, there is, of course, that unavoidable question: what are the Air Force and the Navy doing? And are you talking to them? And how joined up are you? And then there's a wider question, and it touches. I mean, it relates to industry, but it relates also to other aspects. And it's about the risks maybe of this. And Anastasios Matalis is asking, isn't it a little bit dangerous to share tactical strategic informations with civilians outside of the core of the army? I'm not quite sure whether reservists would fall under this definition. I assume not, but probably all sorts of contractors and specialists that you might need to involved. So if you can tackle that in terms of other services, allies, and the industry, these different aspects of connectivity, and making it all sing and dance across these different divides, please.
Yeah, thanks, Bastian. A great bunch of questions there. So yeah, let's talk about the other services first. And I am delighted that I talk to the Navy and the Air Force really frequently, actually, and we've got a sort of three-way going at the one-star level, which, you know, we meet regularly virtually, and we will meet more, I think, physically in the future. But really, the way we're going to bring all of the frontline commands together, so that's StratCom as well, and also all the other elements of defence, is through Defence Digital being a formative leading body with a 3-star CIO in Charlie Forte, with 2-star functional leaders across the pillars now. It's really starting to ramp up. It got just about the funding it needed, I understand, from the integrated review. It's now writing those digital rules of the road. It's working on common technical architecture that we will dock into. We're all working on the same tooling for that architecture. We're going to start working on the same data labeling and the same patterns and structures. So I think the services work together quite well already. An awful lot of what the Navy and the Air Force do is similar to what we do. And in fact, we host each other's services. We deliver each other's services back and forth. And so it's already very collaborative. It's not immediately visible to the outside world because we brand our products as if they're our own. But what sits behind is common very often. But that can only improve as Defence Digital get involved. So multi-domain integration, Project Henosis working out Stratcom is the lead for that. And that will bring us together in the tactical sense, but bring us together, or tactical operational sense, in the warfighting environment, bring us together in the base, working together. Defence Digital are doing the rest of the work for that. So that's good. Interoperability with our allies. Well, I mean, I've got some great connections, and I'm just really touched by Franz saying, I think, Franz Stefan saying potentially the British Army is leading across Europe. I maybe slightly push back on that. Some of them are really doing some brilliant things out there, and we're learning from them. So I'm well connected with French and German armies and their respective CDOs, and the Danish as well. We've got an amazing relationship with the Americans, which is enshrined in Secretary of State level agreement. So through Project Convergence and the work we're doing with them, docked in to Stratcom to take it up to the defense level in the US DoD. I think that's probably going to grow over the coming years. And in fact, I own the Interop team actually in the British Army for information. They're my gang. They're coming under the Thayer banner much more. And if you're going to integrate with partners, your interoperability and your ability to integrate with your international partners in future warfare is bang on. In terms of our commercial partners, it's early days. Under Thayer, I've established a community of interest of commercial partners. I think there's 30 plus in it now. We meet every Friday. I'll open and transparent, tell them what we're doing in Thayer, talk to them about opportunities, particularly talking about experimentation and some of the questions around how we drive a bit more of that. Defence Digital delivering a digital foundry, is the route to market for that. The Army's already doing it. We have the Land Systems Reference Centre in Blandford, which is effectively going to become part of the foundry, we think. And out of there, we're already working really closely on some pretty groundbreaking stuff. The Enhanced Command and Control Spearhead, artificial intelligence sat at the brigade and unit level, deploying next month to test that out as a pilot. That is working closely with industry to deliver AI now, and we've got some great partners on board for that, and we wouldn't be able to do it without them. That's not something we can do organically. We've got to do that with partners. In terms of the risk that you identified, Bastian, or that was identified in the questions around sharing outside, we recognise the fact that there's certain things that we will protect, and that's right to give us our decision advantage. I don't think that's new though. Digitalization is no different to how we've written doctrine for centuries. Probably Franz can tell us about various different situations where other armies got hold of each other's doctrine and began to unpick their way of operating. We will continue to recognise the importance of that, and we've got to find that balance between doing that but also bringing strategic.
Have we lost him again?
Yeah, Mark, do you want to step in?
Yeah, I'll pick up. So what I was going to pick up on was about visibility, improving visibility and coherence of a load of really.
With us.
Oh, you're back, Stefan. But in terms of the innovation, the point Rupert Hill made, in terms of fail fast, I actually think providing more ground rules for those projects, those proof of concepts, so they can experiment and it's not wasted. I see pockets of absolute excellence all over the place, but are they scalable? Are they coherent? Can they be used in other areas? And again, I think this is something that the industry can really help us on. I mean, number of cloud instances we have, which are doing very similar things, not just in the Army, but across defense. The fact we haven't got until recently sort of data rules of the road means that we've got lots of activity going on, but it isn't coherent, it isn't scalable. And that's something that I think is more the bigger challenge rather than the innovation.
Thank you, Mark.
Sorry, you lost me there, Dustin. Did I get the land industrial strategy pointed? I just wanted to make that for our partners out there, just so everyone's aware that off the back of the integrated review, we announced that we would have a different approach to land industrial strategy. that covers the information space as well. So we will be going out to our key partners to enter into relationships which are much more iterative. It plays to the idea that you buy at MVP or you buy at platform level, and you change that platform over a life cycle where you're in a relationship with that industrial partner. And I think that when we talk about risks, that's how we address those risks. We need to get much closer to some of our industrial partners and recognize that we're both in this game together in terms of iterating the capability over time. Thank you. Sorry for that.
Thanks, Stefan. No, that's a very good point, and it touches upon one or two of the other questions around how industry can get involved and how do you generate that agility in those processes. Stefan, sorry, Franz, would you like to add to this round? Okay, let's turn to the last set of questions since we are coming up against the clock here, and it's going to focus on skills. Something that kind of was part of the conversation already, but we haven't tackled it perhaps as directly as some of the questions would like us to. You might have seen in here, someone has pointed out that if you go to the careers page today, the online careers page today, and looked for roles that explicitly ask for digital in the definition of required skills, you will find, I have not checked this obviously, but somebody is suggesting you will find today 2 roles, a driver communication specialist and engineer IT systems operator. So the question is there a bit of a gap between the rhetoric and the reality in terms of career path options for those in uniform? And then just a general question that kind of touches upon comments from a number of people. What do you think are the highest priority skills you need now that you don't have yet to drive this agenda forward? And then let's close with this. We've got about 2 minutes left, so we can get a 60-second burst from everybody. That would be great. Stefan, do you want to start this final round?
Yeah, sure thing. So we recognize skills is absolutely fundamental. Where DPERS, Direct Personnel, is leading on that as an accelerator. It is one of the accelerators in THEA. There is a training needs analysis going on, Defence Digital, across Defence to find out what skills we need. There are 3 skills areas. There's the DDAP skills, which are the cross-government digital skills. There are cybersecurity, and there's knowledge and information management. Those 3 sets are being led by Defence Digital. Castle, which is the people transformation program for the Army, is well aligned with THEA. We speak on a weekly basis. They are looking at this and will continue to work on upskilling our people. Royal Signals have done a piece of work called Caduceus, which is very specific about those specialist skills. And I think wider in THEA, we will have an accelerator later this year, which looks at specialist skills for everybody. I've touched on the fact we're going to upskill people to help the transformation, but then we need to embed that into our core skill set as part of the way we recruit and structure. Over, as they say. Oh, sorry, highest priority? I don't know at the moment. The reality is I have enough contracted capability in the way we're constructed to get whatever I need now. We need to spend some time deciding on what we want to have organically versus what we want to bring in when we need it. That's the trick.
I think just connected to that, we're actually spending quite a lot of time on leadership development for the top of the shop as well, to get them aware of this and really, Steph said, getting the bottom of the organization engaged. I think also using your internal expertise. We've got reservists who in uniform don't look different to their regular counterparts, but bring a whole bag of civilian skills. We're getting better at identifying that and tasking that. As I mentioned, the Specialist Group for Information Services is a team of 120 strong that provides focused work. So using our own internal resource, who are in uniform, understand the culture, to accelerate and shine best practice, I think is also a way of doing it.
Thank you so much. Franz, final 2 sentences, yeah?
Really just 2 sentences. And I think if you go back to the original assumption about this new age of great power competition, and we're trying to outcompete our near peer and peer adversaries here, I think the reserve component, not just in the British Army, but in all the armies, in the West, in NATO countries and so forth. In the United States, the reserve component is going to be instrumentally more important in the years to come than it was in the past, in my opinion, when it comes to this digitalization effort and also competing in all domains. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for contributing. I tried to group different things together. I like to think I managed to touch upon 18 or 19 questions. And I have to apologize for the other 50% of the questions that I did not even get to. But we will make sure that Stefan and Mark get them all and get a readout of everything that was asked, so they can take them with them, think about them, perhaps even get in touch with some people to follow up. There are some good further challenging questions, and there's some good suggestions of what one might look at, what others are doing. So really a very rich menu. I think between the three speakers, we had about a little less than 30 minutes of presentation, and that generated almost 40 questions. That's a pretty good hit rate. So thank you so much, Stefan, Mark, and Franz. I really enjoyed that conversation. Obviously, so much more to do, so much more to discuss, but I think we gave it a fair shot today. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of you in the audience. Check back with the recording when it goes up tomorrow. As I said, we'll make sure our Army friends have the full readout of everything that was asked. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.